Hello and welcome to Arts Alive. This week we explore the themes of connections and disruption. In part 1 we'll have a look at FACT's new exhibition, Lesions in the Landscape, that examines the impact of amnesia, both on the individual and in a collective context. In part 2, the students of Hope University's Masters by Creative Practice present the work of their final module in an exhibition entitled Incompatible. So first, let's delve into Shona Illingworth's installation. For this 4-year-long project, the artist has been working with 2 neuropsychologists in order to understand the consequences of amnesia on the person and how it can be associated with the loss of cultural memory through the study of the depopulated island of St Kilda, Scotland.
The exhibition is in 2 parts. In Gallery 1 there is a large 3-screen video projection and an immersive sound installation with 20 speakers. And then in Gallery 2 there is a body of work called the Amnesia Museum, which is drawn from an archive of materials that I've been gathering and working with over 3-4 years. So Claire is a woman that I've been working with for about 4 years, and at the age of 44 Claire got encephalitis, which caused a large lesion in her brain, on the right hand hemisphere of her brain. So she fell ill and went into a coma, and then when she came out of the coma she had this lesion. And the effects of the lesion are that she has lost access to a large part of her memories for her past, including the birth of her children, a large part of her memory for between her 20s and her 40s. But she also has difficulty in forming new memories, creating new memories. And she has a condition called prosopagnosia, which is commonly known as face blindness, so she doesn't recognize people. This project explores amnesia. It explores amnesia for the individual, and it explores the consequences of cultural erasure or cultural amnesia within a cultural and social context. So St Kilda is an island off the west coast of Scotland. It's quite difficult to get to. It exists in a very particular weather world, so often it's very difficult to get access to that place. And it was inhabited from the Stone Age continuously up until 1930. And in 1930 it was evacuated. So at that point there was a sudden rupture in the ongoing cultural memory of the place. Although since that time it's not an uninhabited set of islands. The National Trust for Scotland own the islands, and their archaeologists and researchers are present in the summer, and it's also the location for a major military weapons testing range, so there are personnel living there. But I'm interested in St Kilda because of its highly constructed. You know, there are a lot of stories created about St Kilda, and there's a kind of very strong mythology around it. What's actually extraordinary about St Kilda, I think, is that it's one of the best preserved sites that map within a small isolated area, or within a small area, 4,000 years of habitation materially. So there's very well preserved stone archaeological ruins, if you like, there that are conserved, and it's got a double World Heritage status, and one of the World Heritage statuses is for its these cultural remnants. But at the same time, very, very little is known about the St Kildan people from them. So the majority of historical accounts of St Kilda being written by visitors. So there are a number of links that I'm exploring the work between Claire and her experience of her condition and St Kilda. So one of those would be this question of who tells your story. And if you don't have access to your own memories for your past, if you can't actually feel that you have lived through being able to access those personal memories, then you rely on other people to tell you the story of your life. And that I think it's a very isolating thing, and it's extremely hard to really imagine what that's like, because I think for the majority of us, we take our memory, our access to our own personal memory for granted. One of the things I would say that is really, for me, important to think about when one thinks about cultural amnesia is that the processes of amnesia can also be very active in the present. So when you have a particularly dominant narrative about anything from a very particular perspective that is motivated perhaps by a particular power structure, one of the consequences of that is that it obscures, suppresses, excludes other narratives and other stories and other accounts. And one of the crucial parts of this project is not so much, well, of course it is to do with our relationship to the past, but it's very much to do with the importance of memory to our capacity to imagine the future. And if you don't have a diversity of memory, then you severely inhibit the capacity to imagine the future. So if you just have these dominant narratives that are obscuring these other stories, that's a very impoverished position to be in.
For this project, Shona worked with Martin Conway and Catherine Loveday, two neuropsychologists specialized in autobiographic memory and who were working with Claire, the subject of the exhibition, in the first place.
Well, I have been taking sort of a fairly clinical role in it, so I've been trying to look after Claire and make sure that her collaboration has been at the level that she's wanted to, and I think also I went on the trip to St Kilda, so I was involved in kind of being part of that trip and also looking after Claire while we were there. And we've just had lots and lots of discussions that came out of that trip, but also that came out of Shona's questions about memory, and that's all fed into the picture of what you see now.
Yeah, I mean, as I remember, the way it kind of began was that Shona and I were having a discussion about somehow or another making a piece of artwork that featured St Kilda. And we're quite keen that St Kilda could be used to represent a number of different things. So it could be used to represent a kind of break in cultural consciousness. And then it occurred to me, well, maybe that's a bit like amnesia, which is not cultural consciousness, but it's individual consciousness in a sense.
And I think there's something very interesting about the way that we all work together, because we all have a sort of common goal, but we all pull in slightly different directions. And so it's really, you know, we all have different skills and different sort of ways of working, and there's something very magical about the way it all comes together, I think.
Well, autobiographical memory is memory for the events of your life, but it's a bit more than that as well. It's also about memory for your knowledge of your life. So you remember what school you went to, who your friends were, what jobs you've worked in, without necessarily remembering specific events. So both types of information, this more general knowledge and specific memories. So I remember the school I went to, and hey, I won the 100 meters race when I was 14. I remember it vividly. Right? I didn't, but anyway. But the point is that those types of knowledge are what autobiographical memory consists of. And the key thing about it is it's individual, it's personal to you.
And I think with Claire, what you find is the devastation that's caused when you lose that, when you lose access to that autobiographical memory. And I don't think until you've spent a lot of time with someone or until you've had it happen to yourself that you can appreciate how amazing and wonderful our memory is, and how much it is part of who we are and the decisions we make, and so on.
I mean, one of the reasons why an exhibition like this is important for all of us really is that I think it's crucial that we scientists who've actually learned something about human memory communicate it to everyone, to the public, so we know about it. Everybody suffers memory problems, particularly as you get older, and it's important that, you know, those of us who've spent a lot of our life studying human memory and have a good understanding of it, make that knowledge available to the general public so you can understand it when you don't remember something, or when your partner appears to not be remembering as well as they should do. You know.
And I think one of the things that's really important about this exhibition is that it allows people to connect with that experience of what it's like to lose memory. And I think that's what Shona does really well. It's, you go away not with just knowledge. I mean, you can read books, you can learn about what amnesia means. But what I hope people go away with is much more understanding of what it feels like to lose those memories, and what that kind of, you know, how deserted you can feel in some ways and how disconnected you can feel in certain ways.
Lesions in the Landscape is on display at FACT until the 22nd of November. Join us in part 2, we'll take a closer look at Incompatible, an exhibition from Hope University's art students. Welcome back to Art Alive. This week we look at links and bridges. Until September 23rd, Hope University's creative practice students are showcasing their work in the Cornerstone building through the exhibition Incompatible.
It's the culmination really of the MA course, the MA study. So it's the result of 2 years study on a part-time basis, or 1 year if you're studying full-time, on the MA by creative practice, which is an MA postgraduate study which is offered here at the Creative Campus and covers a whole range of disciplines. So fine art, design, music, drama and theatre studies, dance and performance. So it's a broad spectrum of creative subjects which offers a rich backdrop for the students on the MA to be able to collaborate with each other and organise exhibitions such as this, where the momentum really kind of grows when you're working as part of a group. For the 2 years, probably the part-time students have worked quite independently, coming together for the lecture programme and tutorials. But to organise an event like this is easier when you're with a peer group and you build an energy and gather momentum, be able to invite more people, hopefully make the private view evening go with a swing. The students were very well aware that their practices, although kind of under a broad umbrella, actually are quite different, quite rightly so. You know, as individual artists, they've all developed an area of research that they are interested in, and final outcomes, you know, which range from digital to painting to installation. So perhaps Incompatible is referring to that diversity. But I think in fine art it's often interesting to have content or titles which are not fully resolved, because the practice of art making is a continuous search, and you have to get things wrong, you have to engage with questions and be confronting yourself on a continual basis with new discoveries. And perhaps that kind of incompatible is a good place to be at, because it's a bit like the grit in the oyster, which makes the pearl. The final kind of module for the master's qualification is to make an exhibition of work to professional standards, which is what this is that we're looking at today. So yesterday there was a panel of lecturers who conducted viva interviews with each of the students to make sure that the academic rigour and the research background and the questions had really been investigated thoroughly, and we do that by dialogue. It's evidenced in the outputs, in the work itself, and so yes, it's an important culmination of the period of study really. And I think it's very good also in terms of professional practice. the students have done a great job at, creating a good environment to show their work, and they've marketed and done publicity. They've invited TV people to come and have a look at the work. They've been in touch with radio. They've done a catalogue. So the level of professional practice expertise they develop, both at undergraduate level actually, because we cover professional practice on the BA as well, but also it takes it further again on the master's course. Yeah, I think it's a strong show. I can't say too much because results and assessment is underway, but I think they've pulled together a really interesting, diverse, sometimes incompatible body of work, which makes for a very interesting experience for the audience.
I'm an abstract painter. I mostly concentrating on colour and form. These pieces represent the past year. My abstract paintings come from memory, so the past year I've been looking at how memories have influenced me and how they represent my feelings from that memory. So I'll look at memories from the past and then I'll paint them in an abstract manner, but obviously the colour and the form come into that. So at first I was painting paintings more, I'd say like more bold, sharp, strong colours that, catch the viewer as soon as you walk in, whereas now I'm painting more from memories that of places I've been, things I've seen, and happier memories, happier times that have influenced brighter and more colourful, more landscape abstract paintings rather than, just like the stripped back emotional colours from that. It's basically one of them things where they say time is a healer, and I think that's really all it is. I think 6 months ago I was in a bad place, but now 6 months on, I've came out of that, and I've carried on painting right the way through. So my painting's basically been a documentation of how my life's changed and how the memories have influenced the paintings over the past 6 months. Yeah. Oh, I've always been inspired by Wassily Kandinsky. He's like one of my favourite artists of all time. But this year, Thomas Noskowski has been the main influence to me work, only because he works in the same way, and he's an abstract painter, but he paints from memory as well, and he uses experience from his past to influence his paintings. So, he works in a very similar way to me. Also, John Hoyland basically is colour, purely influenced by the colour he uses, and he also works with acrylic paints, which is quite rare now. You have a lot of artists working with oil paint. So he was an abstract acrylic painter who also influenced me this year. And obviously Jackson Pollock, he'll always be one of my major influences.
The work it's to do with the feeling that you get in a certain space. So most of the paintings are landscapes, but they're not real places. I tend to go out walking, I'll take sketches, take photographs, but the actual places are more imagined places. And I wanted to put over the feeling that you get when you're in a space and it's a bit dark and you're a bit uneasy about it. And there's a lot of literature about the dark forest, about things like folk tales of not going in the forest because there's bears and there's wolves. But I didn't want to paint the monsters, I only wanted to give that feeling. So that feeling of wanting to step into the painting but feeling it's a little bit, there's a bit of tension there, that you're not quite sure whether that's a place you'd like to be. And I start off with the background, painting it dark, and then start lighting it up and bringing the foreground out. I think most of them have got, like this one here has got the sort of the reds and the yellows in the foreground, so that you're in a good place, but looking back into the painting, that's perhaps not such a good place to be. I like painting, I like landscape, I like walking as well. I do an awful lot of walking in woods near my home, in South Liverpool and Formby, places like that. And I was brought up in the countryside, so I know, that's just sort of memories of forests and woods. They're sort of magical places to me. It's probably to do with aging and getting older and looking at that. But I'm going to sound terribly depressed, aren't I, and say, but it's not, because there's a reality there, but there's, we all look forward perhaps to better times. And as you get older, you're sort of thinking, oh, what's going to happen? Is it going to be more darker times? So Yeah, maybe it's that, but that's not because I'm really unhappy. It's just, I just like painting, that's it.
What I've tried to do with the whole series of work really is to look at the industrial heritage of the areas, which are represented in the greys and the subtle blues in some of the paintings. And then I've overlaid the brighter colours to represent the contemporary buildings and the new forms that have developed in these areas. So I think the message behind it is really one of regeneration, but still being able to reflect that industrial past. And if you look carefully in these locations, you do see traces of the past as you go around. So that's really what the work is about. In Liverpool, I've done a lot of work around the new museum area and Man Island, that section of the city, looking at those contemporary buildings. And in Salford Quays, there's really a host of new buildings around the Lowry Centre and also the new media city down there. There's quite an interesting component to the Salford Quays area in that there's a number of bridges going over the water, which have got quite strong suspension cables cutting through the landscape. And I don't do a direct representation of the area, I just really use it for my inspiration through that engagement. But the lines that come through in my paintings reflect those bridge structures and also the cranes that intersect across the urban landscape, particularly very evident in Liverpool at the moment. So I use collage often as my starting point after I've studied the area that I'm looking to engage with. I tend to use collage in my sketchbooks to try ideas out and to play with form and colour. And often my paintings are actually based on a collage, but develop from it really. I do enjoy working in collage actually because it brings an element of chance into the work. When you're working with coloured papers, I use magazine papers a lot. So that element is quite an interesting component that comes in through the collage.
That's all for this week on Us Alive. See you next time.